A fatal encounter. The desolate reaches of the Orion Arm had long been a source of mystery and danger for the spacefaring civilizations of the galaxy. Amid the swirling cosmic dust clouds and glimmering nebulae, countless ships had vanished over the eons, never to be seen again. So it was with little surprise that the Zorgan warship Imperator picked up the fading distress beacon of a small vessel drifting through the Orion void. Commander Zach Skortok, a hardened Zorgan officer with decades of service to the Empire, studied the mysterious ship that now filled the viewscreen. It was arrow-shaped, barely 100 meters long, with a sleek silver hull that bore the unmistakable hallmarks of human design. Life signs, Zax growled to his sensor officer. 5 humans detected, came the crisp reply. Their ship appears to be crippled, engines and weapons offline. Zax's red eyes narrowed. In his experience, damaged human ships were often more dangerous than they appeared. He had personally witnessed the tenacity and guile of Earth's upstart civilization in dozens of skirmishes along the border. Where other species would surrender or flee, humans always seemed to find a way to fight back. But orders were orders, and High Command had been clear. Any human vessel encountered in Zorgan space was to be captured and its crew interrogated. The Empire was in the midst of a great expansion, annexing and subjugating species across the quadrant, and Earth was next on the list. Prepare a boarding party, Zax ordered, and charge up the particle beams. If the humans try anything, we will reduce their ship to atoms. As the Imperator moved in, matching course and speed with the drifting human vessel, Zax allowed himself a rare smile. Perhaps this day would bring glory and advancement in the Empire's service. If he could wring some useful intelligence from these human captives, it could put him on the fast track to a fleet command. Aboard the Earth vessel Artemis, a very different mood held sway. In the dimly lit CIC, Captain Mira Anaoi and her 4-person crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to coax life back into their crippled ship. They were all that remained of the Artemis complement, the rest killed in the skirmish that had left them stranded parsecs from friendly space. Zorgan warship closing fast, reported Ensign Jax Takeda from the sensor station. They're powering up weapons. Mira, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, leaned over the shoulder of her engineer, Lieutenant Asha Singh. Status of the repair drones. They're working as fast as they can, Asha said, but the damage to the engines is extensive. We might be able to get emergency thrusters back in 10 minutes, but she shook her head. It won't be enough. That monster will be on top of us long before then. Mira turned to Communications Officer Tarakiani. Any response to our distress call? Nothing, Tara replied grimly. The ionic interference is still blocking long-range comms. Mira looked to the final member of her bridge crew, Marine Sergeant Grayson Cole. The big man met her gaze, jaw set in a hard line. You know my vote, Captain. We go down fighting. Make those Zorgan bastards pay for every inch. She held his gaze a moment longer, then keyed the ship-wide comms. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare to repel boarders. As her crew scrambled to arm themselves and secure critical spaces, Mira allowed her eyes to drift to the family photo velcroed above her command console. Her parents and little sister smiled back at her from the image, a snapshot of a distant happy memory, a life half a galaxy away from this cold, lonely death. The Imperator loomed large in the viewscreen now, an angular black wedge bristling with weapons. Mira's finger hovered over the switch that would send a full spread of their last torpedoes straight into the heart of that Zorgan monstrosity. She whispered a final prayer to the ancient gods of Earth and prepared to give the order to fire. Her family would mourn, but they would remember her with pride. In the face of everything, she had not yielded. She had fought. Like all humans facing darkness and terror, she raged against the dying of the light. Taken captive. The first tremors jolted through the Artemis hull as the Zorgan boarding clamps engage. On the grainy security feed, Mira watched the enemy assault pod latch onto their airlock like some oversized mechanical parasite. Breaching pod attached. Asha reported tersely. "They'll be through the outer doors in 30 seconds. Mira looked to Grayson. The Marine had taken up position in the center of the CIC, smart rifle trained on the blast door. His battle armor made him look like a futuristic knight, all black composite and tightly coiled menace. "One pod?" Mira asked. "Against 5 armed defenders. Zorgans don't think much of our fighting prowess," Grayson said, his voice crackling with grim amusement over the comm. "To them, we're just jumped-up cavemen with fancy toys." "Then let's give them a proper welcome to the Stone Age," Mira said. She drew her sidearm as Asha and the others took up positions behind the CIC's meager cover, sidearms, and frag grenades at the ready. The deck shuddered as the Zorgans blew through the airlock. The Artemis internal sensors showed them advancing rapidly through the outer corridors, a dozen hulking figures in black power armor, moving with the precise coordination of elite soldiers. "Stand fast," Mira ordered over the comm, her mouth dry with fear and adrenaline. "Pick your targets and wait for my go." The bulkhead rang with the first impact of a breaching charge. Once, twice, 3 times, and then the thick tritanium door exploded inward in a spray of fire and jagged metal. Stun grenades arced through the opening, filling the CIC with blinding light and concussive force. Mira fought through the disorienting effects, bringing her sidearm up as the first Zorgan trooper surged through the breach. Her first shot sparked off his armor shields, but the second caught him in the faceplate, shattering reinforced glass and sending him sprawling back in a spray of dark blood. But more armored forms were flooding into the CIC, pulse rifles flaring. She heard human screams amid the chaos, and the sharp cracks of Grayson's smart rifle as the Marine bought his life dearly in the teeth of the assault. Something seared across her ribs, a line of white-hot pain. Her sidearm slipped from nerveless fingers as she fell back against the bulkhead, the world going gray at the edges. Through fading vision, she saw Grayson fall, his armor breached in a dozen places, and then a huge armored form filled her view. A gauntlet closed around her throat, lifting her effortlessly off the deck. She clawed weakly at the implacable grip as her lungs screamed for air. Then darkness took her down and away from pain, and she knew no more. Mira woke to the hiss of pressurized doors and the aching throb of her own skull. She was being dragged between 2 Zorgan troopers, her hands bound behind her, feet trailing limp and useless across a gleaming black deck. Through blurred, teary vision, she made out her crew, similarly bound, being shoved and half-carried into a cavernous bay. The dizzyingly high bulkheads of Imperator arched overhead, lit by the sullen red glow of the warship's running lights. They were dumped unceremoniously at the feet of a Zorgan officer, his black uniform bearing the blood-red sigil of the Empire's dreaded Internal Security Division. He was flanked by a phalanx of elite troopers, weapons trained on the battered, bloodied humans. "Captain Mira Anoi," the Zorgan said, his voice a metallic rasp through his helmet's speaker grill. "Your crew are now prisoners of the Zorgan Empire. You will be interrogated and your ship dissected for any useful technology or intelligence." He cocked his head, glittering eyes studying her through the visor. "But first, you will be taught the futility of resistance." One of the guards hauled Terra up by her hair, the young comms officer crying out in pain. The Zorgan officer extended a hand, and a shimmering force field flickered to life around it, writhing with arcs of green energy. "You will tell us the security codes for your ship's computer," he said, almost conversationally, as he pressed his palm to Terra's tear-stained face. "Or you will watch your crew suffer and die, one by one." Terra's screams echoed in the cavernous bay, a raw animal sound of agony. The other humans surged against their captors, shouting incoherent rage and defiance. But it was useless. The Zorgan guards subdued them with ruthless efficiency, hammering them to the deck with powered fists and booted feet. Mira could only watch, helpless fury and despair arising like bile in her throat. The Zorgans thought them weak, easily broken. They would learn the true measure of humanity, even here in the depths of hell. The Zorgan Crucible. The days blurred one into the next, a haze of pain and privation as Mira and her crew were subjected to the tender mercies of the Zorgan interrogators. They were held in separate cells, deprived of food and sleep, questioned for hours on end under the merciless glare of arc lights. Mira bore the brunt of it, Zax Kortok himself overseeing her interrogation. The Zorgan commander seemed to take a perverse pleasure in his work, employing ever more creative methods to break her resolve. There were drugs that set every nerve alight with agony, electroshocks that made her muscles spasm and her teeth crack. There were holo recordings of her crew screaming under torment, their suffering made to seem unending. Through it all, Mira held fast to two things: the knowledge that the security codes she had given the Zorgans were false, a fiendishly encrypted virus that would cripple their systems if used, and the bedrock resolve that she would never betray her people or her principles. Even as the questioning continued, Mira studied her captors. The Zorgans were strong and ruthless, their society forged in the crucible of 1,000 conquests, but they were not invulnerable. She saw the hairline fractures in their monolithic facade, the subtle tensions between the military castes, the simmering resentment of the subject species that made up the bulk of their labor force. And she saw the doubt in some of their eyes when they looked upon the humans, the flicker of uncertainty and even fear. Because for all their power, the Zorgans knew on some primal level what they faced in humanity. A species as brilliant as it was unpredictable, as indomitable as it was passionate. On the 9th day, though it was hard to mark time in the eternal twilight of the cells, Mira was dragged once more into the interrogation room and strapped into the chair, Zax looming over her. "Your silence buys you nothing," the Zorgan hissed, his breath hot against her face. "Your crew have already broken." The one called Grayson wept like a child as he spilled every secret. Mira laughed, the sound startling in its clarity. "You're lying," she said, meeting Zax's incredulous stare with a fierce grin. "Grayson would die before he gave you anything." "They all would." Zax recoiled as if she had struck him. "You think this is a game, human. I can flay the skin from your bones, make you beg for the release of death. Then do it." Mira snarled, straining against her bonds. "Because no matter what you do to me, you'll never break me. And that terrifies you, down in the marrow of those bones." Silence stretched between them, taut and brittle as glass. For a moment, Mira thought the Zorgan would strike her, but then he spun on his heel and stalked from the room, leaving her alone in the blinding light. It was a small victory, but Mira savored it all the same, because it meant that despite everything, she was still unbroken. She was still human. In the next cell, Grayson Cole strained to hear the conversation between Mira and her interrogator. The Marine had taken the worst of the torture, his body a map of cuts and burns and electroshock scars, but his mind remained unbroken. "Give them nothing," he whispered into the darkness, a prayer and a promise. "Endure. Survive. And when the time comes, make them pay." On the Imperator's bridge, Commander Zax Kortok seethed with barely contained frustration. The human prisoners were proving far more resilient than anticipated, their wills unbreakable by even the harshest methods. He had thought them weak, these apes from a backwater planet. He had thought them primitive, for all their vaunted technology and exploration of the stars. He saw now the folly of that conceit. Status of the decryption efforts. He snapped at his subordinates manning the consoles. "Slow progress, Commander," one replied, his voice trembling slightly. "The human encryption is fiendishly complex, like nothing we've encountered before." Zax's fists clenched at his sides, claws drawing blood from his palms. He would rip the secrets from the humans' minds, even if he had to vivisect their brains to do it. And when he delivered their broken bodies and shattered spirits to the Emperor, all the galaxy would know the price of defying the Zorgan Empire. An unexpected ally. In the depths of the Imperator, far from the brutal interrogation cells and the cold calculus of the bridge, a very different sort of Zorgan went about his duties. His name was Chiron Soltak, and he was a junior data analyst newly assigned to the great warship. Kieran was not like his brethren, where they were hard and cold, forged for conquest. He was a gentler soul. He had a keen mind for patterns and data, for the dance of numbers and code, and it had brought him to the attention of his superiors. But as he sifted through the intel streaming in from 100 worlds, Kieran found his faith in the Empire's manifest destiny slowly eroding. He saw the suffering inflicted on conquered peoples, the avarice and cruelty that lurked beneath the veneer of civilization and order. And now, as he studied the data ripped from the human prisoners' minds, he found himself questioning everything he had ever known. The humans were not what the imperial propaganda claimed. They were not savages or monsters, not a threat to be exterminated. Instead, Kieran saw in their memories a vibrant, endlessly diverse civilization, 100 cultures and creeds united by an indomitable spirit. He saw beauty and nobility, compassion and self-sacrifice. He saw a people who faced the universe not with fear, but with boundless curiosity and hope. And the more he saw, the more he knew that his place was no longer among the Zorgan elite. His chance came when he was assigned to monitor the humans' life signs. As he watched their vitals flutter and strain under the interrogator's ministrations, something crystallized within him. A resolve as diamond-hard as any Zorgan warrior's. Slowly, carefully, Kieran began to alter the readings, to subtly tweak the dosages of the drugs pumped into the humans' veins. He could not spare them pain, not without drawing suspicion, but he could keep them from the brink of death. It was during one of these illicit adjustments that Kieran first saw Captain Mira Anawi. He had tapped into the feed from her cell's surveillance camera, watching as she paced the narrow confines of her prison like a caged beast. Even battered and bruised, her dark hair matted with blood, the human woman radiated an aura of strength and defiance. She held herself like a warrior, proud and unbowed, and in her eyes Kieran saw a fire that no amount of torture could extinguish. Moment by moment, day by day, Kieran worked to keep the humans alive. He ghosted through the Imperator's systems like a benevolent virus, covering his tracks with consummate skill. But he knew it was only a matter of time before he was discovered. He had to find a way to contact the humans, to let them know they had an ally. And so, in a moment of desperate inspiration, he crafted a message in an ancient human tongue, a language he had gleaned from the prisoner's memories. It was a simple phrase, but one heavy with meaning. Dum spiro sparrow. While I breathe, I hope. Using a micro-drone of his own design, no larger than a gnat, Kieran slipped the message into Mira's cell, etching the words into the wall above her sleeping pallet. The work of a moment, before the drone self-destructed, leaving no trace. Now all he could do was wait, and hope the human captain was as clever as she seemed. Mira traced the unfamiliar letters with a fingertip, frowning in concentration. The words were Latin, an ancient language of Earth, but their meaning was clear. Someone on this ship was on their side. Someone with access to highly advanced technology and an in-depth knowledge of human culture and history. For the first time since their capture, Mira felt a flicker of hope kindle in her chest. She had to find a way to contact this mysterious ally, to turn this unexpected asset to their advantage. The next time Kieran accessed the feed from Mira's cell, he found her staring directly into the camera, her gaze unwavering. And then, slowly and deliberately, she began to tap her finger against the wall, right below the etched message. It took Kieran a moment to recognize the pattern. Long and short taps, pauses and breaks. Morse code, an ancient human method of communication. U-N-D-E-O-S-T-O-O-D. Mira tapped out. W-H-A-A-R-E-Y-O-U. With his heart hammering in his chest, Kieran sent his drone to reply, this time scorching his response into the cell floor. A-F-R-I-E-N-D, he wrote. H-E-R-E-T-O-H-E-A-L-P. And in that moment, a bond was forged between the human captain and the Zorgan data analyst, an alliance that would shake the very foundations of the Empire. They traded messages in furtive bursts, Mira tapping out her questions and Chiron replying via drone. Slowly, painstakingly, a plan began to take shape. Mira learned the layout of the ship, the movements of the guards, the weaknesses in the Imperator's security protocols. And Chiron, with the fervor of a convert, set to work on a program that would cripple the warship's systems and give the humans a fighting chance at escape. It was a desperate gambit, with the odds stacked heavily against them. But Mira had faced desperate odds before, and she knew that sometimes all it took was one spark of hope to ignite the flames of rebellion. On the Imperator's bridge, Commander Zach Skortok stared at the readouts from the interrogation cells with a growing sense of unease. The humans were up to something. He was certain of it. Their vital signs had stabilized, their brain activity showing subtle spikes and patterns that hinted at some hidden communication. But try as he might, Zax could not decipher it. "Double the guard on the prisoners," he ordered, his voice sharp with tension. "And bring me the data analyst, the one called Chiron." For he knew, with the instinct of a predator scenting blood, that the key to the humans' defiance lay in the patterns of data, the dance of numbers and code. And he would have the truth, even if he had to tear it from Chiron's mind himself. The Great Escape. Chiron's hands shook as he made his way to the interrogation cells, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He had known this moment would come, the moment when his treachery would be discovered. But he had hoped for more time. Time to finalize the plan, to ensure Mira and her crew had every chance of escape. Now, as he stepped into the cell block, he saw the increased security, the wary eyes of the guards tracking his every move. They knew something was amiss, even if they could not yet put a name to it. Mira was waiting for him in her cell, her posture tense and alert. She had received his warning, tapped out in hurried Morse code. "Colton Pyro. Elias. Geed. Accelerate Pelan. Bead ready." As Chiron approached, flanked by two guards, Mira met his gaze through the energy barrier. In that moment, a wealth of understanding passed between them. Gratitude and respect, defiance and determination. "The commander wishes to see you," one of the guards said. His voice filtered through his helmet's grill. "You will come with us." Chiron nodded, his face a mask of calm even as his heart raced. As the guards turned to lead him away, he brushed his hand against the cell's control panel, a gesture that could be mistaken for nervousness. But Mira saw the flicker in the barrier, the momentary weakness as Chiron's hidden device did its work. With a wordless cry, she hurled herself forward, passing through the compromised field in a flash of energy. The guards spun, reaching for their weapons, but Mira was already moving. A blur of motion, a dance of deadly grace, as she disarmed one guard and used his own weapon to stun the other. Chiron watched in awe as Mira took down the guards with brutal efficiency. She moved like a force of nature, unstoppable and fierce, and in that moment he understood why the Zorgans feared humanity. "The others," Mira said, tossing Chiron one of the guards' weapons. "We have to free them." Together, they raced through the cell block, Mira leading the way with unerring instinct. One by one, her crew were liberated. Grayson, Ashuptera, each of them ready and eager for the fight. As alarms began to blare throughout the ship, Chiron led them to a maintenance shaft, a narrow tunnel that wound through the bowels of the Imperator. It was a tight fit, especially for Grayson in his bulk, but they pushed on, driven by desperation and the will to survive. On the bridge, Commander Zach Skortok was in a rage. Reports flooded in of the humans' escape, of guards being overwhelmed and security systems failing. He slammed his fist down on the console, cracking the hardened plasteel. "Find them," he roared at his crew. "Seal off all decks and send every available soldier to hunt them down." But even as he gave the order, a new alarm blared to life, this one more urgent and strident than the rest. Zach stared at the readouts in disbelief, his eyes widening in horror. The Imperator's main computer was under attack, its firewalls crumbling before a virus of staggering complexity and sophistication. and the source of the virus was the maintenance shaft where the humans had last been sighted. In the tunnels below, Chiron worked feverishly at a console, his fingers flying over the keys as he unleashed the virus he had spent weeks perfecting. It was a thing of beauty, a digital scalpel that sliced through the Imperator's defenses like a hot knife through butter. "How long?" Mira asked, standing guard with her liberated weapon at the ready. "Minutes," Chiron replied, his voice taut with concentration. "Maybe less. Once the virus reaches the main reactor control, we'll have our window." Grayson and the others exchanged glances, their faces grim but determined. They all knew the stakes, knew that this was their one and only chance. Failure meant death, or worse, a return to the interrogation cells and the tender mercies of the Zorgan Inquisitors. But success meant freedom. A chance to strike back at the Empire, to light the spark of resistance that could set the galaxy ablaze. And so they waited, hearts pounding, weapons primed, as Chiron's virus burrowed ever deeper into the Imperator's core. Waited for the moment when the great warship would be laid low, its power and might turned against it by the ingenuity and courage of a few brave souls. On the bridge, Zax could only watch in horror as system after system fell to the virus's onslaught. Weapons, shields, life support, all of them flashed red on his screens, the ship's mighty voice reduced to a strangled whisper. And then, with a final, shuddering groan, the Imperator's main reactor went critical. Alarms screamed, consoles erupted in fountains of sparks, and the great ship lurched like a wounded beast. In the maintenance tunnels, Mira and her crew felt the shudder, heard the distant roar of failing engines. Chiron looked up from his console, his face alight with triumph. "Now," he said, his voice ringing with a fierce joy. "Now we run." And run they did, racing through the collapsing passageways of the dying ship, dodging debris and explosions, fighting their way past the last desperate defenses of the Zorgan crew. To the hangar bay where their stolen shuttle awaited, a promise of escape and a new beginning. But even as they neared their goal, a final obstacle loomed before them. Commander Zax Kortok, his face a mask of rage and hate, blocking their path with a squad of his most elite warriors. "You?" he snarled, his eyes fixed on Chiron with murderous intent. "Traitor, you will pay for this betrayal with your life." Chiron met the commander's gaze, his own eyes clear and calm. "No," he said softly. "It is you who will pay, Zax Kortok. You and all those who have built an empire on the suffering of others." And with those words, he charged forward, a cry of defiance on his lips, Mira and the others at his side. It was a battle for the ages, there in the shattered heart of the Imperator, human and Zorgan, locked in a struggle that would echo through the annals of galactic history. But in the end, it was the humans who stood victorious, their spirits unbroken, their resolve unshakable. And as they boarded their shuttle and blasted free of the dying warship, they knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in the story of humanity, a story of courage and hope, of unity in the face of tyranny, a story that would shake the stars themselves. Turning the tables, the shuttle hurtled through the void, outrunning the shockwave of the Imperator's death throes. In its wake, the once mighty warship was reduced to a cloud of expanding debris, a fitting pyre for the Zorgan arrogance and cruelty it had embodied. On board the shuttle, Mira and her crew tended to their wounds, their faces etched with exhaustion, but alight with the fierce joy of survival. Chiron sat apart, staring out at the stars with a look of wonder and disbelief. "I never thought I would see the stars like this," he said softly. "As a free man, unbound by the chains of the Empire." Mira placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "You made this possible, Chiron. Without you, we would never have escaped." The Zorgan looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "And without you, I would never have found the courage to rebel. You showed me what it means to be truly alive, to fight for something greater than myself." As the shuttle plotted a course for the nearest human outpost, Mira gathered her crew around her. They were battered and bruised, but unbroken, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. "We struck a blow against the Empire today," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "But the fight is far from over. The Zorgans will be coming for us, and they'll be coming hard." Grayson cracked his knuckles, a grim smile on his face. "Let them come. We'll be ready." Asha nodded, her eyes alight with determination. "We have to get word to Earth, to let them know what we've learned about the Zorgan plans." Mira turned to Karen. "Can you help us with that? Your knowledge of Zorgan systems and protocols could be invaluable." The data analyst straightened, his face set with resolve. "I will do everything in my power to aid your people, Captain. The Empire's tyranny must be stopped, no matter the cost." And so, as the shuttle raced towards friendly space, a new plan began to take shape, a plan to turn the tables on the Zorgan Empire, to use their own weapons and strategies against them. Chiron worked tirelessly, using his intimate knowledge of Zorgan networks to ferret out vital intelligence, fleet movements, supply lines, the locations of key military installations. Mira and her crew, meanwhile, reached out to their contacts in the Federation military, relaying the information and laying the groundwork for a coordinated strike. It would be a gamble, a roll of the dice on a galactic scale. But the humans had an advantage the Zorgans could never match: the ability to think outside the box, to adapt and innovate in the face of adversity. And they had Karen, a Zorgan who had turned his back on everything he had ever known to fight for what was right. His defection sent shockwaves through the Empire, sowing the seeds of doubt and dissent among a populace already chafing under the yoke of oppression. As word of the humans' escape spread, as rumors of their impending counterattack grew, the conquered worlds of the Empire began to stir. Whispers of rebellion, of resistance, passed from mouth to ear in the slave pens and the factory floors. And in the halls of power on Earth, the Federation leadership made a fateful decision. They would not cower before the Zorgan threat, would not bend the knee to alien tyranny. Instead, they would fight, with every ship, every soldier, every resource at their command. They would take the war to the heart of the Empire itself. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. Human ingenuity and courage against Zorgan brutality and might, in a war that would decide the fate of countless worlds. And at the center of it all, a small group of heroes who had defied the odds and ignited the flames of hope. Mira Anauri and her crew, the unlikely allies who had forged an unbreakable bond in the crucible of adversity. Together, they would lead the charge, would be the tip of the spear in humanity's most desperate hour. And win or lose, they would show the galaxy the true measure of the human spirit. For they were the best of their kind, the brightest and the bravest, the ones who would never surrender, never give in to despair. They were human, and they would fight to the last breath, to the last beat of their indomitable hearts. And in the end, that would make all the difference.